September 15, 1943, 15:30 hours, Port Moresby, New Guinea. Captain Frank Mitchell stood in the operations tent at Port Moresby Airfield, staring at a map covered in red and blue pins. Each red pin represented a confirmed zero sighting over the past 2 weeks. Each blue pin marked where an American pilot had been shot down. There were too many blue pins. Mitchell was 28 years old, flight leader of the 475th Fighter Group's 431st Fighter Squadron. He'd been flying P-38s in the Southwest Pacific since January 1943, had seen the evolution of tactics, watched the Japanese adapt to American strategies, and watched too many good pilots die because their aircraft couldn't match the Zero's maneuverability. But something had changed in the past 3 weeks. The kill ratio was shifting, not dramatically, not obviously, but enough that Mitchell noticed. American pilots were coming back from missions with kills. More importantly, they were coming back alive. Mitchell knew why. The piano wire modification, the unauthorized control cable tensioner that Technical Sergeant James McKenna had developed and installed on select aircraft. Mitchell's own P-38 had the modification. He'd felt the difference immediately, the instant response, the elimination of that fractional delay that had been killing pilots. But only a fraction of the squadron's aircraft had been modified, maybe 15 out of 60 P-38s. The mechanics were installing the tensioners quietly without authorization at the request of individual pilots who'd heard about the improvement. It was spreading through word of mouth, mechanic to mechanic, pilot to pilot. The problem was coordination. Some aircraft had the modification, others didn't. Pilots didn't always fly the same aircraft. A pilot might fly a modified P-38 one day and feel confident in turning engagements, then fly an unmodified aircraft the next day and revert to old tactics, only to discover his airplane couldn't respond fast enough. That inconsistency was dangerous. It created confusion about what tactics actually worked. Mitchell needed to solve this problem, but doing so officially meant admitting that mechanics had been making unauthorized modifications to flight control systems. That would trigger investigations, courts-martial, the end of the modification program. So Mitchell did what any combat leader would do when regulations conflicted with saving lives. He found a way around the regulations. The squadron meeting. That evening, Mitchell called together every pilot and crew chief in the 431st Fighter Squadron. 30 pilots, 15 crew chiefs, all crammed into the operations tent after dinner. The tent smelled of aviation fuel, sweat, and cigarette smoke. A single overhead bulb cast harsh shadows across tired faces. Mitchell stood at the front with a piece of chalk and a blackboard he'd borrowed from the intelligence section. He drew a simple diagram, a P-38 viewed from above with arrows indicating roll direction. "Gentlemen," Mitchell began, "we need to talk about something that officially doesn't exist. But since all of you have heard the rumors anyway, we might as well discuss it openly." The pilots exchanged glances. They knew what was coming. "The piano wire modification," Mitchell continued. "How many of you have flown an aircraft with the modified controls?" 8 hands went up, more than Mitchell expected. "And how many of you want it on your aircraft?" Every hand went up. Mitchell nodded. "That's what I thought. Here's the problem. We can't get official approval for this modification. The engineering command won't authorize field modifications to flight control systems without extensive testing. That testing would take months. We don't have months. We're losing pilots now." He paused, let that sink in. "So here's what we're going to do. Every aircraft in this squadron is getting the modification. All 60 P-38s. We're doing it over the next 3 days during scheduled maintenance cycles. The crew chiefs know how to install the tensioners. Sergeant McKenna has been training them." Lieutenant Robert Hayes, sitting in the front row, raised his hand. "Sir, what about the engineering inspections? Won't they catch the modifications?" "The tensioners are removable," Mitchell explained. "Before any official inspection, the crew chiefs will remove them temporarily. After the inspection, they'll reinstall them. As far as the official records show, all aircraft are within specifications." Hayes hesitated. "That's falsifying maintenance records, sir." "Yes, it is," Mitchell agreed calmly. "I'm ordering it anyway, and I'm taking full responsibility. If the engineering command finds out and wants to court-martial someone, they can court-martial me. but I'm not going to watch more pilots die because we're following regulations that don't account for combat reality." The tent was silent. Then Sergeant Bill Rodriguez, Morrison's former crew chief, spoke up from the back. "Sir, the crew chiefs are with you. We've been wanting to do this for weeks. We just needed command approval, or at least command looking the other way." Mitchell smiled grimly. "Consider this me looking the other way. Get it done." September 17, 1943, the mass installation. The modification program began at dawn on September 17th. Every crew chief in the squadron had been briefed by McKenna on the proper installation procedure. Most had already installed at least one tensioner and understood the process. But McKenna moved from aircraft to aircraft, checking each installation personally, making sure the tension was correct. The work was methodical but had to be done carefully. Each P-38 required 2 tensioners, one for each aileron control cable. The installation took about 20 minutes per aircraft when done by an experienced mechanic, faster if 2 mechanics worked together. McKenna had scavenged piano wire from every damaged aircraft within 50 miles. He'd collected enough wire to modify 120 aircraft, twice what the squadron needed. Other squadrons were already asking for his help. By September 19th, every P-38 in the 431st Fighter Squadron had the modification. The pilots noticed immediately. The difference wasn't subtle. It was like flying a completely different aircraft. Lieutenant James Chen, recently assigned to the squadron as a replacement pilot, took off on September 20th for his first combat mission. He'd heard about the modification but hadn't experienced it yet. During the mission, his flight intercepted 6 Zeros at 14,000 feet over Lee. Chen dove on the rear Zero, fired, missed. The Zero reversed hard left. Chen's instinct was to climb away, that's what the training manual said, but something made him try to follow the turn instead. His P-38 snapped into the roll like nothing he'd experienced in training. The nose came around instantly. Chen got inside the Zero's turn, fired a 3-second burst, saw his tracers walk up the Zero's fuselage. The Japanese fighter exploded. Chen's first kill on his first mission, using tactics that supposedly didn't work in a P-38. When he landed, Chen found McKenna in the maintenance area. Chen was still shaking from adrenaline. He told McKenna what had happened, how the aircraft had responded, how he'd gotten the kill. McKenna just nodded and said, "That's how it's supposed to work." The 49th Fighter Group. Lieutenant Colonel George Prentice commanded the 49th Fighter Group, based at Guisap Airfield about 80 miles northeast of Port Moresby. The 49th was one of the oldest and most experienced fighter groups in the Southwest Pacific, had been flying P-38s since early 1943 and had the combat record to prove it. But even the 49th was losing aircraft at unsustainable rates. In August alone, they'd lost 14 P-38s in combat. Most were shot down in turning engagements with Zeros. The pilots knew the doctrine, don't turn with Zeros, but combat forced them into situations where they had no choice. Prentice heard about the piano wire modification in early September through informal channels. A pilot from the 475th mentioned it during a poker game. At first, Prentice was skeptical. Unauthorized modifications to flight control systems, that was a court-martial waiting to happen. But the pilot showed him the statistics. The 475th's kill ratio had improved by 40% in 3 weeks. Pilot survival rates were up. Something was working. Prentice was a pragmatist. He'd been flying combat missions since 1942, understood that regulations written in comfortable offices didn't always account for battlefield reality. If a modification improved aircraft performance and saved lives, he wanted it, official approval or not. On September 22nd, Prentice flew to Port Moresby and found Captain Mitchell. They met in the operations tent, away from prying ears and official channels. "I want the modification for my group," Prentice said without preamble. "All of it, every P-38 we have." Mitchell studied him carefully. "You understand what you're asking for, this isn't authorized. If it goes wrong, if someone crashes because of the modification, both of us will face charges." "I understand. I also understand that I've lost 14 pilots in the past month. If there's something that can help them survive, I don't care about regulations." Mitchell respected that. "I'll send Sergeant McKenna to GUSAP tomorrow. He'll train your crew chiefs. Give him a week and every aircraft in your group will be modified." Prentice nodded. "What about supplies?" "The piano wire. McKenna's been scavenging it from damaged aircraft. We have enough, but you'll need to set up your own supply chain eventually. This modification is spreading faster than we anticipated." "How many groups are using it now?" "3 that I know of, probably more that I don't. Word's getting around. Pilots talk, mechanics talk. Pretty soon every P-38 in the Southwest Pacific is going to have this modification, whether the engineering command approves it or not." McKenna goes north. Technical Sergeant James McKenna arrived at GUSAP Airfield on September 23 aboard a C-47 transport. He carried a canvas tool bag containing wire cutters, pliers, and 206-inch pieces of pre-bent piano wire, enough to modify 100 aircraft. The 49th Fighter Group's maintenance officer, Captain Thomas Brennan, met him at the airfield. Brennan was a West Point graduate by-the-book officer, the kind who followed regulations precisely. McKenna expected resistance. Instead, Brennan shook his hand and said, "Colonel Prentice told me you're here to save lives. Show me what you've got." McKenna spent the afternoon demonstrating the installation procedure to the 49th crew chiefs. 15 mechanics gathered in a maintenance hangar around a P-38 with its inspection panels removed. McKenna showed them the control cable routing, explained how the slack developed, demonstrated the proper installation of the piano wire tensioner. The crew chiefs asked good questions. "How much tension? How do you know if it's too tight? What if the wire breaks?" McKenna answered each question based on his months of experience. "The wire won't break," he explained. "It's high-tensile piano wire rated for twice the load we're applying. The original control cables would fail first. As for tension, you want to eliminate the slack completely but not add so much preload that the controls bind. Test it by hand after installation. The control surfaces should move smoothly with no delay." One crew chief, a sergeant named Williams from Texas, raised a practical concern. "What about inspections? Engineering comes through once a month checking everything. They're going to notice." "Remove the tensioners before inspections," McKenna said. "Reinstall them afterward. Takes 5 minutes per aircraft. Keep the tensioners in your tool bag. As far as the official records show, your aircraft are stock." Williams grinned. "I like the way you think, Sergeant." By September 25th, the 49th Fighter Group had modified 40 aircraft. By September 28th, all 73 of their P-38s had the tensioner installed. The pilots noticed the difference immediately, just as the 475th's pilots had. October 3, 1943, the big test. The modification's effectiveness was put to the ultimate test on October 3 during a major engagement over Wewak. Wewak was a Japanese stronghold on the northern coast of New Guinea, heavily defended by fighters and anti-aircraft guns. American bomber formations attacked Wewak regularly, and every attack drew massive Japanese fighter response. The missions were among the most dangerous in the theater. On October 3, the 5th Air Force launched a maximum effort strike against Wewak. 90 B-25 medium bombers escorted by 80 P-38 fighters. The Japanese responded with every available fighter estimated at 60 to 80 Zeros and other types. The resulting air battle was the largest the Southwest Pacific had seen in months. Over 200 aircraft engaged in a furious dogfight that ranged from sea level to 18,000 feet. Lieutenant Robert Hayes was flying wing for Captain Mitchell. Both were flying modified P-38s. As the bombers reached their target and Japanese fighters swarmed up to intercept, Mitchell's radio crackled. "All fighters engage at will, keep them off the bombers." The P-38s dove into the Japanese formation. Hayes followed Mitchell down, saw Zeros everywhere, counted at least a dozen within visual range. This was exactly the kind of massive engagement where turning ability mattered most. Mitchell called for a hard left turn to intercept 3 Zeros climbing toward the bombers. Hayes rolled and pulled, his P-38 responding instantly. He got inside the turn of the nearest Zero, fired, saw hits sparking along the fuselage. The Zero rolled inverted and dove away trailing smoke. Hayes didn't have time to confirm the kill. 2 more Zeros reversed on him. He pulled hard, felt the G-forces pressing him into his seat. The P-38 stayed with him through the turn, no delay, no hesitation. He got his nose on the second Zero, fired a snapshot that missed, then reversed direction as the Zero tried to scissors. The Zero pilot was good, experienced. He matched Hayes turn for turn, trying to force an overshoot, but Hayes's P-38 was responding faster than the Zero pilot expected. Hayes stayed inside the scissors, gradually closing the range until he got a clean shot at 300 feet. The Zero exploded, debris hammered Hayes's windscreen. He dove away looking for his wingman. All around him, P-38s were engaged in turning fights with Japanese fighters. Normally, this would have been a disaster. P-38s couldn't turn with Zeros, but today was different. The modified P-38s were staying in the fight, rolling and turning aggressively, matching the Zero's maneuver for maneuver. The Japanese pilots were clearly confused. Their usual tactics weren't working. They'd initiate a turn expecting the P-38 to lag behind, only to find the American fighter staying with them or even getting inside their turn. The engagement lasted 18 minutes. When it was over, the Americans claimed 37 Japanese fighters destroyed for the loss of 6 P-38s. The kill ratio was over 6-1, unprecedented for a large engagement involving Zeros. More importantly, of the 80 P-38s that participated, only 6 were lost. Normally, losses in such a large engagement would have been 15 to 20 aircraft. The modified controls had made the difference. The Japanese response. Japanese intelligence officers analyzed combat reports from the Wewak engagement with growing concern. Their pilots were reporting that American P-38s were maneuvering differently, more aggressively, with faster roll rates, staying in turning fights instead of running. Several experienced Japanese pilots, including some with 30 or 40 kills, reported that tactics which had worked reliably for months were suddenly failing. The Americans weren't flying differently, they were still using the same basic strategies, but their aircraft were responding faster. Lieutenant Commander Saburo Sakai, one of Japan's top aces, was recalled from combat duty in early October for debriefing. Intelligence officers wanted to know what had changed with American fighters. Sakai told them about his September engagement where a P-38 had reversed direction faster than should have been possible. He described the timing, how he'd initiated his standard countermaneuver expecting the P-38 to lag, only to find the American fighter already in position to fire. It's like fighting a different aircraft, Sakai explained. The P-38 still looks the same, but it doesn't move the same. It's faster in the roll, more responsive. I can't exploit the delay anymore because there is no delay. The intelligence officers asked if the Americans might have introduced a new model of P-38 with improved controls. Sakai said the aircraft looked identical to the ones they'd been fighting all year. Same engines, same external appearance, no obvious modifications. The Japanese had no way of knowing that the change was hidden inside the control cable system, a modification so small that even close inspection might miss it. By mid-October, Japanese fighter units operating in New Guinea received new tactical guidance. Avoid prolonged turning engagements with P-38s. Use hit-and-run tactics. Attack from superior altitude, dive through the formation. Don't let the Americans draw you into a turning fight. This was a significant psychological shift. For 2 years, Zero pilots had known they could outturn any American fighter. That confidence had been the foundation of their tactical doctrine. Now that foundation was crumbling. The impact on Japanese pilot morale was measurable. Pilots who'd been aggressive and confident in July were becoming cautious and defensive by October. The psychological advantage was shifting to the Americans. The spread continues. By late October 1943, the piano wire modification had spread to at least 7 fighter groups operating P-38s in the Southwest Pacific. Nobody knew the exact number because the modification was still unofficial, still unauthorized, still spreading through informal channels. Technical Sergeant McKenna had become something of a legend among P-38 mechanics. He traveled from airfield to airfield, training crew chiefs, checking installations, ensuring the modification was done correctly. He never sought recognition, never asked for credit. He just wanted to make sure pilots survived. Other mechanics began developing their own variations of the tensioner. Some used different types of wire. Some designed alternative installation methods. As long as the modification eliminated the cable slack and improved control response, McKenna didn't care about the exact implementation. The 5th Air Force Engineering Command was aware that something was happening. They'd received reports of improved P-38 performance, better kill ratios, pilots reporting enhanced maneuverability. But every time they sent inspectors to check the aircraft, everything appeared to be within specifications. The inspectors didn't know that the crew chiefs were removing the tensioners before inspections and reinstalling them afterward. The modification remained hidden in plain sight. In November, Lockheed sent a team of engineers to New Guinea to investigate reports of unofficial P-38 modifications. The engineers interviewed pilots, examined aircraft, and eventually discovered the piano wire tensioners. Their reaction surprised everyone. Instead of condemning the modification, the Lockheed engineers were impressed. They ran tests, measured control response times, calculated stress loads. Their conclusion: the modification was safe, effective, and should have been part of the original design. Lockheed incorporated a similar tensioning system into the P-38J model that began production in December 1943. The official documentation credited Lockheed Engineering Analysis for the improvement. McKenna's name never appeared in any official record. But the pilots knew and the mechanics knew, and that was enough.